What's up, friends? I pray you're standing strong in your faith. So today we have a big one. We're going to be discussing a podcast that Bill Maher appeared on called Pod Save America. Haha, so funny, right? Instead of God Save America. And the host is John Lovett. Now, I'm going to warn you guys, John Lovett is far more left than Bill Maher. But my question I have for you is this. How would you respond to these leftists who are advancing transgenderism, who are saying that there are more than two sexes? Or in John Lovett's position, he's saying that gender-affirming surgery is so important that we need to continue to advance this. And get this, you guys, and we're going to be responding to this, that gender-affirming surgery is comparable to open heart surgery. It's that important. It's saving lives. Can you believe that? So let's dive right in. And let's see how we need, as Christians, to stand strong in our faith and respond to these type of ideologies.
What we're talking about is a teenager who has felt that they have a gender dysmorphia. So what they feel like.
All right, let's just pause. I think he meant to say dysphoria, because dysmorphia has to do with abnormalities, okay, in the body.
Is that they feel deeply unhappy, depression, all really rampant.
Yes,
and they go to their parents.
They feel that, and then they blame it on the thing that has been put in their mind way too much, that it may be because of you're in the wrong body. Mm-hmm. When Trump said there's only two sexes, again, pendulum swinging way too far to stupidity. Obviously, sex is more complicated than just two sexes. Mm-hmm. There are people who absolutely are, quote unquote, in the wrong body.
Okay. All right. Did you catch that? So there are more than two sexes. So many on the left, they love to claim this. They love to claim that human biology allows for more than two sexes. So Bill Maher, as you just saw, when presenting his position, he says to Lovett, who's far more left than he is, that sex is more complicated than just two sexes. And he further argues his point by mentioning individuals who feel they're in the wrong body as though that's evidence. Now, I've sat with many people who struggle with gender dysphoria, who believe they're in the wrong body, but that does not mean that that's a different sex, okay? Because when you think of this perspective from the left, that there's more than two sexes, there's more than male and female, it reflects a profound misunderstanding, my friends, of the biological realities that we're in. I mean, for example, the functionality that we see, that when you look at a male and a female, they are sexually dimorphic as human beings, meaning that they are two kinds that complement one another physically, anatomically. When you think of the two reproductive roles of male and a female, clearly defined by biological markers such as chromosomes, reproductive organs, and their hormonal profiles. So when you throw in issues like intersex conditions, that's often cited, to argue against the binaryism. So like binaryism, male, female, there's only two sexes, is very bigoted. It's very narrow-minded. And yet, when we use science, when we look at reality, when we see what is in nature, we see male and female that can reproduce. So the intersex, this is actually a disorder of sexual development. This does not prove that there's a third or an altered form or a new sex. Intersex are biological anomalies, and less than 0.02% of the population are intersex, but they're not separate, distinct biological sexes. So we have to make sure that we understand that when we're having these conversations with people on the left or anybody who is arguing for more than two sexes. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Gender dysphoria, somebody who claims to be something other than what they were, quote, assigned, is not proof that there's a different sex. It's proof positive that there's confusion, that there's disorder, that there's dysphoria. That goes back to the fallenness. That goes back to the corruption, my friends, that we're in. So we need to be patient and considerate, not certainly condescending, but we need to make sure that we are balancing these views appropriately. Now, before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge that on the Christian Post, I have recently put this article together called The Three Untrue Leftist Claims on Trans Surgeries for Minors. So I encourage you guys to check that article out on Christian Post. All right, let's continue now for the second part where John Lovett is going to be advancing this claim from the left that gender-affirming surgery is a good thing.
Science, the research, all right.
Okay, so remember, the science, the research, they're all about science. I just gave you a case, philosophically and scientifically, of biological realities that there's two sexes. Now he wants to make the case, scientifically, that gender-affirming surgery is a good thing to help that person who's trapped or caught or feels they're in the wrong body, that this is a way to free them, and it's a good thing.
Makes clear that, yes, there are exceptions. Yes, there are people practicing it in ways that maybe go too far. But for the most part, study after study shows.
Okay, remember, study after study. I love to see what studies he's referring to.
That gender-affirming care saves. Wait, let me talking. It's my turn.
This is one thing, by the way. They kept talking over each other, and it was getting to the point. Sadly, is very embarrassing and frustrating.
So quiet for so long after I interrupted
Well,
a
you
few
weren't,
times.
but okay.
But once I stopped talking, boy, I was good at it. And that gender-affirming care saves a lot of lives. And the truth is, we talk about these edge cases, talk about athletes, talk about locker rooms, but for the most part, what we're talking about is a very small group of people that just want the opportunity to live and express themselves.
Okay, let's respond to this one now, guys. So essentially, this leftist claim is that gender-affirming treatments help kids, they help minors. Okay, now if you take a look at this discussion, and I always encourage people, hey, if you have time, sometimes I put this out to help you guys to abbreviate it so that you guys can kind of get the nuts and bolts, if you will. But the two go deeper into this discussion, okay? Because this was, I think almost an hour and a half long podcast. But Lovett here asserts that gender-affirming treatments are genuinely beneficial for kids that experience gender dysphoria. And he says study after study after study. Now, one of the clips I did not show you is that Bill Maher, in response to, so he's refuting John here. Remember, because I told you earlier, John is far more left. And he refers to a study that was investigating this very thing to see how well gender-affirming treatments, whether it's puberty blockers, cross-sex treatments, or even surgery itself, how beneficial long-term it is for their mental capacity, et cetera, et cetera. He forgot the person who did this research, but her name is Dr. Johanna Olson Kennedy. And it was on this very topic that she had investigated people who transitioned. And because after a period of time that she found that gender-affirming treatments were actually not beneficial for these people. Okay, she spent months, if not over a year, with some of these people. But she didn't like the conclusion. So she does not, after 10 years, and this was taxpayer money, she doesn't like the results, so she doesn't put out the findings. And that's what Bill Maher is actually countering John Lovett, okay? Now, not only that, but you guys can go to a website where it has this article called Growing Up Transgender. And it's a transgender website. And the counter argument that they're going to use is, science is always evolving. Research is always changing, different methods, different strategies, and you got to be very, very particular. You can't really be biased. And the reason why we don't want to send out these findings is because people are going to take a hold of it. All those people are anti-woke, and they're just going to destroy more young lives. So we prevented that research to go out because they're going to abuse the findings. They're going to take it too literally. Well, it's what you found. It's the results. You just didn't like the end results. You thought that gender-affirming treatment was going to be so good for all of these people, when in fact, the vast majority of them says, I wish I never went through this. I wish I never took puberty blockers. I wish I never believed in me having gender dysphoria and transitioning my body. I mean, some of these people, you guys, as we know, mutilate themselves. They can never go back. So they say, well, things change. And so the blog argues that gender-affirming treatments are beginning to demonstrate benefits of puberty blockers, that mental health improvements are happening. And even though the metrics are small, but over time, just give it time, you're going to see that as we alter young people's bodies, and it's necessary to help them, we're going to see the change. Now, let me show you guys another video that PragerU did. And this is excellent because it's dealing with this very thing about these recent studies that have come out to actually show you no, there's no substantial research, credible research, long-term research that shows the side effects of after having gender-affirming surgery, a sex change operation, is beneficial for people.
By the National Health Service in Great Britain. Dr. Hilary Cass, former president of Britain's Royal College of Pediatrics, analyzed data from England's Tavistock Gender Clinic, the largest in the world until it was shut down in 2024. Her report is a scathing indictment of the clinic's practices. She demonstrates there is no evidence medical interventions benefit gender-distressed young people. What the kids need, Dr. Cass concludes, is counseling. Great Britain, Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark have essentially stopped medical treatment of teens whose bodies are 100% healthy and are focusing on their minds and hearts. The Netherlands, France, and Belgium are not far behind. In March of 2024, a report in France described sex reassignment in minors as potentially one of the greatest ethical scandals in the history of medicine. But in the US and Canada, I'm sorry to say, it's full steam ahead. How do we stop this runaway train? As a doctor, I'm going to put responsibility on my colleagues.
Yeah. I mean, they need to do the research. That's what she further goes to talk about. But I wanted to point out some of the data that she even brings out, because the reality is there's no solid studies, you guys, that have been conducted on transgender youth that overwhelmingly show they are better off mentally, physically, and psychosocially after undergoing puberty blockers and cross-sex treatments, and especially undergoing medical transitions. My friends, even in my travels, I have talked to people whose grandchild, whose child, even their adult child, has gone through transitioning. And oftentimes, and I even had one come up to me in one of the conferences I was speaking at, who transitioned and then has been trying to go back to their biological sex. And just a heartbreak and just all of the issues and the suicidal ideation. And like the doctor was saying there in that clip, they need counseling. They need love. They need Jesus. You know, several years ago, the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, they even revised their findings, because in their initial findings, like, oh, no, we need to be supporting this. We need to be advancing this type of treatment. We need to get taxpayer dollars to be funding this kind of thing. We need to be having healthcare, you know, covering this type of procedure for kids. And yet, after a period of time, when they reanalyzed the data, they found that gender-affirming surgeries, or again, sex change operations, actually did not demonstrate any mental health improvements among their patients years later. In fact, it made things far worse. In fact, not only that, you guys, but when they looked at post-operative patients, they found that they were experiencing far more suicidal ideation and increased mental health issues. So a lot of these people afterwards needed psychiatric care. Some of them committed suicide. This is the reality. And we care enough to address these things. And I appreciate you guys watching this to learn how you can respond, not just to the leftist, but even if somebody in your life struggles with gender dysphoria, or you have somebody who's contemplating whether or not to support a friend who wants to transition, whatever the case is, that you'll be able to use this video to help ground you. The other thing I want to mention on this point before we look at the third and final thing that they discuss on the podcast is that the American College of Pediatrics strongly refutes the notion that transitional treatment is a healthy or beneficial approach for children. In fact, the article states this from the American College of Pediatricians: puberty blockers may actually cause depression and other emotional disturbances related to suicide. In fact, the package insert for Lupron, the number one prescribed puberty blocker in America, lists emotional instability as a side effect and warns prescribers to monitor for development or worsening of psychiatric symptoms during treatments. Not only that, my friends, but the CAS review in the United Kingdom, something that I was just showing you on the PragerU video, they pointed out some serious issues and a noticeable shortage of solid evidence backing the safety and the effectiveness of gender transitions for young people. So because of this, as you saw, the European countries, Sweden, Finland, a lot of UK itself, they've opted to tighten their guidelines or even pause some gender-related medical treatments for minors. Why is it? Because it doesn't work. It's not good for an individual, particularly, especially for our most vulnerable, for children. And yet, the United States and Canada are among the two countries advancing gender-affirming sex change operations, my friends. Let's be clear what it actually is. These type of verbiage they use tries to soften what's really going on here. Now, neglecting this long-term impact, this so-called gender-affirming treatment, including cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers, guys, this is child abuse. That's what this is. This is child abuse. I've had a lot of debates with people on this very topic, and I have to tell them, frankly, that's what it is. They don't like hearing that. But listen, when you're manipulating a young person, their thoughts and their body, what is that? When you're taking this ideology and you're ramming it through the throats and your school education, whatever it is, that is taking the most vulnerable. Children, my friends, as you and I know, they are in a very formative, vulnerable, fashionable, formidable stage of their lives. And so cognitively, as they're developing, they can't deal with all these changes in the complexity of the sexuality and even just trying to figure out who they are, not just in terms of their sexuality or their sexual identity or their gender identity, just who they are in general. They're vulnerable. And so it's our responsibility to protect them from the culture wars that aim to strip away their true identity in God. And as young people, it's our responsibility as adults for these young people to help them mature. That's our ethical duty. And as a father for, that's what I'm trying to instill in my kids so they can help be that to other people in their life, to point them to the Lord, that they would develop in their true potential as God intended. All right. So now let's transition to, no pun intended, to the third and final discussion between John Lovett and Bill Maher.
There are a few examples of people getting older and realizing that they shouldn't have transitioned. That happens. It's real.
Yeah, more than a few.
But there are also really important surgeries that people get for their heart, and they go wrong, and somebody dies. And nobody says we must stop the cardiologist. No one,
I cannot believe he uses this as an
no
example.
one says we must stop
Wow.
the surgeons. We say
Even Bill
let's-
Maher
Your
shocked.
analogy?
Well, my analogy is only that wait, let me finish.
I'm just
Can I
saying-
finish?
yes.
Is it my turn to talk?
No,
Yes, go
you're right.
And what you say is, let's make sure that this
John.
version of it is being practiced well. We don't get rid of the specific surgery. We don't throw out a whole field of medicine. We say, let's make sure we're doing it in a way that's healthy. What we're talking about is
Okay, guys. I appreciate you guys just hanging in there for some of you guys. And I encourage you guys to subscribe if you have not done so already. But after listening to this conversation and listening to what Lovett says at the very end, I was shocked. I was shocked that this guy used this analogy, but it makes sense. Because again, when the moment you think there are more than two sexes, you're not in reality. You're not being factual. You're not being honest. You're not being scientific. I don't know what you're really being, other than an ideologue who's trying to, discriminate against Christians and reasonable, common sense folks who believe in binaryism, believe in male and females. But there are several problems here, my friends, if you haven't caught them already. The claim that gender-affirming surgery is similar to open heart surgery ignores the critical differences between them. For example, open heart surgery, John, is usually performed to treat severe life-threatening conditions. And the goal, hopefully, is to either save that person's life or significantly improve their health. Let's look at gender-affirming surgery, John. That is an elective surgery, and it aims to, quote, align a person's physical appearance with their gender identity. Okay? There's nothing there that says, oh, altering this person's body, taking their original anatomy and mutilating it, that does not align functionally. That right there, my friends, is saving a person's life. The actual surgery, elective surgery of gender-affirming surgery, a sex change, is performed based solely on the feelings that's related to this person who is struggling, right? Gender dysphoria, and can lead to irreversible surgical changes that most later regret. Someone who undergoes open heart surgery doesn't look back and regret the procedure if it saved their life. But yet, why are we having so many people who, after having a sex change, are coming out saying, I wish I never did this? This doesn't save lives. This operation is not necessary to save a transgendered person from dying. Therefore, equating the two types of surgeries is a false analogy. It's misleading. It's abusive. So in closing, my friends, I think the thing we have to focus in on, and I want to actually share a couple verses, and one of them comes from Psalm 139. And I know many of you guys know this, but it's so powerful and it's so true, because anyone who's thinking God made a mistake or I shouldn't be in this body, the reality is this, because this is serious when it comes to protecting and actually teaching young people the truth. The Bible says this in verse 13 of Psalm 139. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. The sad reality, my friends, as you and I know, there are young people out there. And if you're watching, if you're one of them, and you feel that you are in the wrong body, or you're a different sex than male and female, and you don't truly believe that God made you, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are unique, and that you are precious in his sight. And as the psalmist says here, my soul knows it very well, and you don't. I pray that you would turn to the Lord. He hears you. He sees the pain that you're in. And no amount of treatment to try to transition to something you think that you need to be happy, it's not going to make you happy. It's going to make things worse. In fact, listen to the words of Jesus here in Matthew chapter 19. He says in verse 4, Jesus answered them, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? So if you're a male, if you're a female, God made you in that sex for a reason. And he's given you gifts. He's given you a personality that's unique to you. And so when we try to alter that, when we try to change that, when we say we're not good enough and we're not trusting the Lord and you're not turning to him, my friends, it's going to wreck you. It's going to destroy you. Many of you who are struggling even in your sexuality or struggling in your relationships, yet you know that God is real. You just have to just confess your sins before him and trust that God, and only God, can redeem you. Jesus came into this world, my friends, lived a perfect life. And we see here in Psalm 19, he teaches the creational order, that he made them male and female. And out of that is marriage, that a husband and a wife, they become one in flesh, and they can procreate, and they have sex, and they cherish one another. And that's a gift, my friends. This intimacy is a gift. But that's the constraints that God has put in a relationship between a man and a woman, that there's love and respect. They complement each other. They submit one to another in the fear of the Lord. That's God's beautiful divine design. So in a nutshell, my friends, when the leftists like John Lovett and Bill Maher are out there telling you there's more than two sexes, telling you that gender-affirming surgery is good, telling you that operations like open heart surgery is comparable to that of gender-affirming surgery, hopefully you'll know how you can respond. So thank you guys for watching. Until next time, keep standing strong in your faith.